I had been married. I had been married to Duke Zayne Blackwood for 6 months, and in all that time he had never touched me, never held my hand, never lingered near me beyond what propriety demanded. Our marriage had always been a business arrangement, a merger of two powerful families. And yet, every glance, every word from him carried weight, as if the man could shape the world and my heart without even trying. That evening, grandmother had called for a formal dinner, insisting we sit together. I could see the anticipation in her eyes. She wanted an heir, wanted to see the union of Blackwood and my family bear fruit. The pressure was unbearable. At the table, I was acutely aware of every eye on us. Every movement, every gesture was scrutinized. Zayne sat rigid, composed, his expression unreadable as always. I forced myself to appear calm, but inside my heart thudded violently. "Duchess Katherine," grandmother said, her tones soft but sharp. "You are already 27. Surely you understand what is expected of a wife in this house." I swallowed. I did understand. And yet the thought of him, of Zayne, sitting cold and distant beside me, made my stomach twist. He doesn't care, he never has, and he likely never will. He lifted his goblet with perfect composure, barely glancing at me. "We are capable of managing matters ourselves," he said softly, but deliberately loud enough for grandmother to hear. His words were precise, controlled, and for the first time a little defiant. I wanted to look at him, to find some warmth in his expression, some hint that he felt as trapped by these expectations as I did. But his face was a mask. Calm, imposing, unyielding. Grandmother's gaze lingered on me, sharp and demanding. "The tonic has been prepared for you both. It will ensure that, well, that the duties of marriage are fulfilled," she said, her words hanging in the air like a challenge. I felt my cheeks burn. I lifted the cup he offered silently, swallowing the bitter liquid, my hands trembling slightly. He did the same, throat moving deliberately as he drained his own cup, his eyes flickering to mine for the briefest moment. Something unspoken passed between us, a tension I couldn't define. The rest of the meal passed in suffocating silence. Every time Zayne's gaze met mine, I felt a strange heat in my chest, a pull I didn't want to acknowledge. I reminded myself over and over, he has never loved me. He cannot. And yet, why does my pulse betray me like this? When the meal ended, Zayne rose first, his movements deliberate, composed. He didn't speak to me directly, but I felt the unspoken command in the air. "This tonic is affecting more than I thought it will." "Duchess," he said softly, low enough for only me to hear, "there are things you misunderstand about me." I froze, my chest tight. Misunderstand him? What could I possibly misunderstand? My mind spun, but I didn't dare answer. I only nodded, swallowing the strange, unbidden longing that bubbled in my chest. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The question had been burning in my chest for months, a silent frustration that refused to be ignored. I took a deep breath and stepped quietly into his study, where he often stayed late, pretending to work. He looked up, startled for the briefest moment, but his composure didn't waver. "Zayne," my voice trembled, betraying my carefully constructed calm. Why don't you?" I hesitated, cheeks burning. "Why don't you want to be with me? Is it because I'm not beautiful enough, or my body isn't good enough?" The words hung between us, raw and desperate. I immediately wished I could swallow them back, but it was too late. He froze, the pen in his hand hovering above the paper. His pupils tightened slightly, a reaction so subtle I almost missed it. Then he stood, moving closer, his expression unreadable, yet I could see the faintest flicker of concern, or something I didn't yet understand. "You feel unwell?" he asked quietly, his voice low and calm, not angry but cautious. "Do you need a doctor?" "No," I snapped, frustration boiling over. "It's not that, it's you." I turned away, clenching my fists at my sides, trying to stop the heat rising in my chest. You've never wanted me, not even once." He stayed close, silent, and I could feel the subtle tension radiating from him. I wanted him to say something, anything, to justify the months of emptiness between us. But instead, he remained calm, composed, as though my words barely disturbed him. I don't understand," I whispered, voice breaking. Have I done something wrong? Am I not enough for you? He finally reached out, resting a hand lightly on my shoulder. The touch was deliberate, controlled, and it sent a jolt straight through me. Katherine, he said slowly, measured, it is not about beauty nor about you failing me. There are reasons you cannot yet understand. I cannot explain everything tonight, he said, voice low and steady, yet with an edge I had never heard before. I turned and left the room the moment I closed the door behind me. I knew one thing with dangerous clarity. I could not stop thinking about him. Not his composure, not his coldness, not even the distance he maintained between us. I had never liked these gatherings. Endless faces, endless chatter, and a constant undercurrent of judgment that made my chest tighten. Tonight was no different. The Blackwoods had invited half the city, each guest a carefully selected piece in the family's social chessboard. I moved through the room with practiced elegance, nodding and smiling when required, keeping my thoughts tightly under control. But my eyes always found him. Zayne Blackwood, Duke of Blackwood, standing near the fireplace, composed as ever, his attention seemingly elsewhere. And then I saw her. A woman, laughing lightly at something Zayne said, leaning closer than etiquette should allow. She was beautiful, with familiar features that made my heart stop, dark hair pinned perfectly, a smile that carried a warmth I had never seen from Zayne toward me. My stomach twisted. I forced myself to look away, but the image burned into my mind. I heard his laugh soft, genuine, and it was directed at her, not me. I wanted to storm across the room, demand an explanation, but my body felt frozen, paralyzed by a mixture of fear and a jealousy I had never known I could feel. She seems familiar, I whispered to myself. My mind raced. Who is she? Why does he look at her like that? I kept my distance, pretending to speak to acquaintances, but I could feel every subtle glance, every curve of his lips, every flicker of expression. It was impossible to ignore. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, I moved toward him under the pretense of passing by. But as I drew closer, their laughter stopped abruptly, and both turned toward me. The woman's smile didn't falter, but the way she looked at me, amused, perhaps curious, made my chest tighten even more. I wanted to speak, to demand an explanation. My chest ached with something I couldn't name. Jealousy, longing, confusion. I excused myself, moving quickly through the crowd, ignoring curious glances. I didn't care about manners or appearances anymore. I needed air. I needed to escape the suffocating realization that I had allowed myself to care. Once outside, I leaned against the cool stone of the terrace, trying to steady my breathing. My mind replayed the scene over and over. His smile, the way he had leaned slightly toward her, the ease between them. I whispered to the night air, unable to stop myself. Why can't he see me? Why doesn't he care about me like that? And yet, as the cold night wind hit my face, a small, guilty part of me knew the truth. I had no right to demand anything from him. He had never promised me love, never offered warmth, and still I wanted it. Inside, Zayne remained composed, the perfect Duke, unreadable as ever. Outside, I was a whirlwind of frustration, longing, and helpless jealousy, trapped between what I felt and what I knew I could never have, at least, not yet. I wanted him, and he had never promised me anything. Before I could gather my thoughts or calm the storm in my chest, a sharp voice echoed through the hall. "Katherine, Duke Zayne, both of you here immediately." "Grandmother," her tone left no room for argument. My stomach dropped. I exchanged a brief glance with Zayne. He didn't flinch, didn't even sigh. But I noticed something subtle, an almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw, a faint furrow of his brow as if he were preparing himself for battle. We followed her to the drawing room. The entire family was there, the Blackwood matriarch's piercing eyes, the patriarch's stern expression. I felt every ounce of their scrutiny like a weight pressing down on me. "Katherine," grandmother began, her voice deceptively sweet, "you are the Duchess, a woman of beauty, talent, and grace. And yet you are 27 and still empty-handed. You understand what is expected of a wife in this house, do you not?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. My throat felt tight, my chest constricted by the pressure I had known since the first day I married into this family. Zayne stepped beside me, silent, composed, the perfect picture of the Duke. His hand brushed lightly against my back, not enough to touch, not enough to be noticed by the others, but enough for me to feel it. That small gesture sent a shiver through me, a strange warmth I couldn't explain. "I assure you," he said quietly, his voice even but firm, "Katherine is more than capable. There is no need to rush matters." Grandmother's eyes narrowed, clearly unimpressed. "Capable," she repeated sharply. "Capability does not produce heirs, Duke. A house needs continuity. The Blackwood line cannot wait while propriety and hesitation dominate." I flinched at her words, feeling a mix of shame and fury. And yet, when I looked at Zayne, I saw something I hadn't seen before, something subtle, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. His eyes softened slightly as they met mine, and the faintest protective edge touched his tone. "She is not lacking," he said calmly, almost gently, but the weight behind his words was clear. "Your concern is noted, but it is misplaced. She will do what is required in her own time." I felt a strange mixture of relief and heat rising in my chest. He wasn't dismissing me. He wasn't leaving me to endure this alone. Even behind that composed, cold exterior, he was here for me. Grandmother huffed, clearly dissatisfied with his answer, but the conversation shifted as other relatives spoke up, comparing me to other women, recounting their successes, and subtly questioning my worth. Every word stung, a reminder that no matter what I did, I was never quite enough. But through it all, Zayne's presence was a tether. When their words cut too deep, he would shift subtly, brush his hand against mine under the table, or place himself between me and the next verbal assault. His composure never faltered, but I began to notice the small cracks, an almost imperceptible flash of anger when they insulted me, a protective glimmer in his eyes I had never seen before. For the first time, I realized something that terrified and thrilled me at once. The man I had always thought cold and untouchable, who had never once offered me warmth, might actually care. Not openly, not in ways I could demand, but enough to protect me quietly, subtly, fiercely. And that realization left me both hopeful and helpless. Later that evening, after the family had retired and the hallways had emptied, I found myself alone in my chambers, trying to make sense of the storm of emotions that still churned inside me. Zayne's presence during the family confrontation had lingered in my mind. The way he had defended me subtly, without raising his voice, without breaking his composed demeanor, it was almost maddening. I could feel the heat of it still, a quiet, potent reassurance I had never allowed myself to crave before. I sank into the armchair by the window, wrapping my hands around my knees. My mind refused to settle. He cares. He really does, but why does it feel like there is so much I'll never understand about him? And then it came, unbidden, the memory that had haunted the whispers of his past. The name I had heard only once, a fragment from a conversation with a distant cousin, Zayne's first love. I remembered her face, the way Zayne had described her in passing years ago, before I had ever met him. Soft features, pale hair, eyes that seemed to capture his every thought. She had been everything he once wanted, everything he had lost. And I had known even then that I could never be her. A shiver ran through me. Is that why he keeps me at a distance? The thought twisted in my chest. Jealousy, frustration, and an ache I could not name welled up all at once. Does he still think of her? Does he compare me to her every time he looks at me? The anger came next, sharp and raw. I am Katherine Blackwood. I am his wife. I deserve something, anything beyond distance and coldness. And yet, beneath that anger was something more dangerous, something that made my pulse stutter every time I thought of him. Desire, longing, the quiet, undeniable pull I felt toward a man who had never offered me warmth, but who, that evening, had protected me in the only way he knew how. I leaned back in the chair, my gaze fixed on the candlelight flickering in the corner of the room. The flame danced like his presence, steady, yet somehow alive, impossible to ignore. And for the first time, I realized that this marriage, this cold, controlled, impossibly distant man, might be more than I had ever expected. But I also knew it would not be simple. There were shadows in his past, expectations weighing down on him, and a distance I could not yet bridge. And still, I wanted to try, even if it broke me. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The candlelight flickered across my chambers, shadows dancing as if echoing the turmoil in my chest. Zayne's presence earlier, the way he had subtly protected me from grandmother's verbal assault, kept replaying in my mind. I paced the room, trying to quiet my thoughts, but the ache in my chest wouldn't relent. I needed answers, clarity, even if it was only a tiny spark. "Duchess," a low voice interrupted me. My heart jumped. Zayne stood in the doorway, composed as always, yet there was a tension in his stance I hadn't seen before. "You should rest. The night is late." I can't," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I keep thinking about today, about you, about everything." He stepped closer, the faint scent of his cologne brushing against me. I could feel the heat from his presence, impossible to ignore. "Katherine," his voice dropped, measured but soft, the kind of tone he rarely used. "You misunderstand me. I have reasons I cannot yet explain. It is never because you are lacking." I swallowed hard. The intensity in his gaze made my pulse race. I wanted to ask more, demand more, but my pride faltered. Instead, I whispered, "Then, why can't you let me in?" For a heartbeat, his composure faltered. His eyes darkened, and I caught a flicker of something protective, something almost human behind the mask he always wore. "Because," he said finally, "there are things in the past you cannot yet know, things you would not understand, but I care more than I allow myself to show." My chest tightened. Those words, subtle as they were, sent a jolt straight through me. I wanted to reach for him, to feel the warmth I had longed for since the day we were married. But before I could, a sharp knock on the door broke the moment. "Duchess Katherine, Duke Zayne," grandmother's voice pierced the quiet. "Breakfast is ready, and there are matters that cannot wait." I stepped away from him, my heart still hammering. Zayne's expression remained calm, unreadable, as he followed me silently. Later that morning, a gathering of family and close acquaintances had been arranged. Conversations buzzed, polite but pointed, and then I saw her again. A woman, radiant and confident, laughing lightly at something Zayne said. He leaned slightly toward her, hand brushing hers in a casual, friendly manner. My chest constricted. She exists in his world, and I am invisible. I forced a smile, trying to appear composed as I listened to grandmother's sharp voice. "Katherine, you are beautiful, talented, and intelligent, but the Blackwood line cannot wait. You must produce an heir, ensure your place in this family, and—" Her words blurred. I only saw him, his hand near hers, his laugh directed at someone else, and the world seemed to tilt. "Excuse me," I muttered, moving quickly through the crowd. I needed air, needed space, needed to escape the suffocating mix of jealousy, longing, and humiliation. Zayne noticed my retreat, of course. I saw it in the way his eyes flicked toward me, a subtle tightening of his jaw. But he remained composed, letting the moment pass without explanation. And that, more than anything, burned inside me. Later, alone in my chambers, I relived the scene again and again. Why do I care so much? Why does it hurt so badly to see him smile at someone else? And yet, even in my anger, even in my jealousy, I could not stop thinking about the flicker of care I had seen earlier in the night, his subtle protectiveness during the family confrontation. He hides so much beneath that composure, I realized, heart aching. And yet, I cannot stop wanting him. I could not hold it in any longer. The image of Zayne leaning toward that woman, laughing, casual and warm, haunted me. My heart throbbed with a mix of jealousy and fear. Does he even care about me at all? I found him in the library, as always, a book in hand, his posture perfect, calm. Seeing him like this made my chest ache even more. I swallowed hard, summoning every ounce of courage and anger. "Zayne," I said, voice trembling, "who was she?" He looked up slowly, eyes meeting mine with that unshakable composure. "Who do you mean?" His tone was neutral, measured. "You know who I mean," I snapped, taking a step closer, my hands trembling. "At breakfast, at the gathering, laughing with that woman. Why were you smiling at her like that? Do you still care about her?" He closed the book slowly, his expression unreadable. For a moment, silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Then he stood and walked toward me, calm, composed, but with a subtle intensity I had never seen so clearly before. "Katherine," he said softly, but the weight in his voice made me stop mid-step. "You are my wife. You are here. You are the one who matters." I blinked, shocked, but the old fear rose in me. "Then why does it feel like you do? That you care for her more than me?" My voice broke. "I see the way you look at her, the way you laugh, lean toward her. And I swallowed hard, heart hammering. I can't stop thinking maybe I'll never be enough for you." Zayne's eyes darkened, and for the first time the calm mask cracked just slightly. He took a step closer, and I could feel the heat radiating from him, intense and almost dangerous. "You are enough," he said, low, steady, almost a growl. "More than enough. The woman you saw, she is nothing to me. Do you understand? Nothing." I wanted to believe him, but the ache in my chest made it hard. Then why keep me at a distance? Why make me feel like I'm invisible? He hesitated, and in that pause I saw something I had never seen before. Something human, vulnerable, real. His jaw tightened, his eyes softened, and a small, almost imperceptible exhale escaped him. "Because I cannot give what I feel, not yet," he admitted quietly, his voice rougher than usual. "Not without everything being right. My past, my family, the expectations. I cannot risk hurting you. That is why I remain composed, distant. But it is not because you are lacking. You are everything." My breath caught. Everything. The word lingered between us, heavy and potent. I wanted to reach for him, to feel the truth behind his words, but pride and fear held me back. He stepped even closer, close enough that I could feel his presence pressing against me, yet he did not touch me. "Do not mistake my distance for lack of care," he said softly. "You are the only one I will ever care for in this way. The rest is just noise, shadows from a past you cannot yet know." My chest heaved, heart pounding, and I could feel the ache of longing twisting inside me. For the first time, I realized the depth of my own desire for his warmth, his attention, his acknowledgement. And yet I also realized the depth of his restraint, the careful way he navigated the storm of duty, expectations, and his past. I don't know if I can wait," I whispered, barely audible. His gaze softened, the faintest flicker of vulnerability passing through. "Then let it be enough for now that I am here, that I notice you, that I care, even if the world does not allow me to show it fully." I wanted to argue, to demand more, but instead I simply nodded, swallowing the mix of relief, longing, and frustration that consumed me. The fire between us had been ignited, small but undeniable, and I knew this was only the beginning. For the first time since our marriage, I felt it hope, desire, and the terrifying, exhilarating truth that Zayne Blackwood, Duke of Blackwood, was far more complicated than his composed exterior had ever let on. Months passed, though it felt like a lifetime in silence. Zayne and I maintained the polite distance expected of us. He was always present in the grand halls, attending to his duties, but rarely spoke beyond necessity. I buried myself in my art, wandering the estate to paint, sketch, or oversee household matters. I threw myself into my routines, hoping the ache in my chest would dull. Yet, no matter how much I tried to ignore him, I noticed. He remembered the smallest things, the way I liked my tea brewed, the exact placement of my easel in the morning sunlight, the books I preferred by the hearth. Subtle gestures, so minor that no one else would notice, but I felt every one. The warmth of acknowledgement, the quiet attention, gnawed at me in a way that left my chest tight with both longing and frustration. One rainy afternoon, as I was cataloging the estate ledgers, a servant rushed in, breathless. "Duchess, Duke Zayne, the southern wing's roof has collapsed in the storm. The family archives are at risk." I looked up, heart pounding. Zayne was already there, cloak damp, hair slick against his temples, expression calm but intense. "We need to act quickly," he said, voice steady, commanding. "Katherine, I need you to help organize the salvage. Your knowledge of the estate will be invaluable." I hesitated, but the urgency left no room for pride. We moved through the wet halls together, hands occasionally brushing as we lifted documents or rearranged fragile boxes. Each accidental touch made my pulse spike. Each glance, each small word of instruction, carried a weight that set my chest on fire. At one point, as we worked to move a large ledger, our hands met over the leather-bound spine. I froze, heart hammering, and he paused, meeting my gaze. His eyes softened fleetingly before returning to their usual calm. "Careful," he said quietly. His voice was a low rumble, just enough to make me shiver. I nodded, swallowing hard, trying to focus on the task rather than the heat of his nearness. And yet, even as we moved through the chaos, I couldn't ignore the subtle hints of care. The way he shielded me from falling debris, adjusted the angle of my stool so I wouldn't strain, reminded me to dry my hands. And then a memory hit me, sharp and painful, the image of him with the other woman months ago. My stomach tightened, jealousy mixing with fear. I wanted to ask, to demand, but the urgency of the crisis, the closeness, the shared task, everything, kept my words trapped. Zayne noticed my hesitation, of course. I caught a flicker in his eyes, a trace of concern. He didn't speak, didn't comment, but the faint tension in his jaw said more than words ever could. By the time the storm had passed and the archives were safe, both of us were soaked and exhausted. We stood side by side, catching our breath, the silence between us heavier than ever. Finally, I found my voice, trembling. Why do you stay so distant? Even when you—" I stopped, unsure how to phrase it. "Even when you care so much, I can feel it. Why keep me at arm's length?" Zayne didn't answer immediately. He looked at me, really looked, and for a heartbeat, the composure he wore like armor faltered. "Because some things cannot be given freely," he said slowly. My heart clenched at the words, and yet, the old misunderstandings, the shadow of his past, still lingered, leaving me frustrated, longing, and utterly helpless. That night, as I cleaned paintbrushes by candlelight, I realized something terrifying. The distance between us could no longer protect me from what I felt. I wanted him, and I feared he wanted me too. It began with a whisper in the halls, an unfamiliar voice, lilting, confident, carrying a warmth that immediately set my teeth on edge. I followed the sound, curiosity mixed with dread, until I reached the drawing room. There she was. A woman with pale hair, eyes that seemed to hold every secret of his past, standing before Zayne. And just like that, the pieces clicked into place. His first love. I froze, heart hammering, unable to move, unable to speak. Zayne, ever composed, had one hand resting on the back of a chair, but I noticed the tension in his shoulders, the faint clenching of his jaw. His usual calm faltered, if only slightly, in her presence. "Katherine," his voice, low and controlled, reached me, and I turned reluctantly. The woman turned then, eyes meeting mine, and the recognition passed between us like a spark. "Zayne," she said softly, "I didn't mean to intrude." "You shouldn't have come," Zayne said, his voice firm but not unkind. He took a step closer to me, subtly shielding me from her presence. I felt the faint warmth of him, the protective aura I had longed to see. My chest ached. Why now?" I whispered, almost to myself. "Why bring her here?" Zayne's eyes softened, and finally, after months of cold restraint, he spoke of the truth. "Because you deserve to know, Katherine. I never loved her the way I could have. I was bound by duty, by family, circumstances beyond my control. My heart has always been my own to protect." I blinked, processing the words. "So, all this time, your distance, your coldness, it wasn't because of her." "No," he said quietly, stepping closer, the faintest flicker of vulnerability in his gaze. "It was because I feared losing you to expectations, to duty, to the world. I could not risk showing you what I truly feel until I was certain I could protect both you and myself." The revelation hit me like a tidal wave. My chest tightened, my pulse spiking, and the ache in my heart, long months of longing, frustration, and confusion, found a voice. You were afraid of me," I whispered, a mix of disbelief and relief trembling in my words. He reached out then, not fully touching, but close enough for me to feel the heat of him. "Afraid of how much I might want you, and afraid that desire alone could hurt you if misjudged. I have always cared, Katherine. Perhaps in the wrong way, quiet, restrained, but it has always been you. I felt my knees weaken, the tension between us unbearable. Then, why make me wait? Why let me doubt? Because, he admitted, eyes darkening, voice low and rough with emotion. To love you openly without certainty would have been a betrayal. I could never risk your heart when mine was already bound by duty, by the weight of everything around us. But now, he paused, gaze locking with mine, intense and unyielding. Now there is no one else, only you. I wanted to reach for him, to erase the months of doubt, longing, and jealousy. My fingers trembled and I whispered, only me. Only you, he repeated, the protective edge in his tone softening to something almost tender. From this day forward, you will never have to wonder. The woman from his past stepped back, gracefully, as if understanding the unspoken boundary. I see, she said quietly. Then you two must decide for yourselves. As she left, the room felt suddenly empty, yet charged with a new, undeniable energy. I looked at him, the man who had been distant, unreadable, and cold, and now stood before me, not just my husband, but a man who finally revealed the truth of his heart. I could hardly breathe. And yet, in that moment, the fire between us ignited fully. The months of longing, frustration, and unspoken desire finally converging into something real, something we could no longer ignore. And for the first time, I understood him. The cold, composed Zayne Blackwood had loved me all along, quietly, painfully, and completely. The night was impossibly still, the estate wrapped in shadows and soft candlelight. I wandered through the halls, trying to distract myself with thoughts of my art, but the truth was unavoidable. I could not stop thinking about Zayne. Every look, every subtle act of care over the past months had burrowed into my chest, leaving me raw and restless. And now, after the revelation of his past love, the confession of why he had kept me at arm's length, the distance between us felt intolerable. I found him in the library, as expected, seated with a book, but not reading. His gaze lifted when I entered, calm and composed, yet there was something in his eyes tonight, something darker, more intense, something that made my pulse quicken. Katherine, he said softly, closing the book with deliberate care, you should not wander alone at this hour. I can't stop thinking, I admitted, my voice trembling. Not about you, about everything. His eyes darkened imperceptibly. Slowly he rose, the candlelight tracing the sharp lines of his face. Then perhaps we should stop pretending once and for all, he said quietly, each word deliberate, each step drawing him closer. I felt my chest tighten, breath catching. The space between us shrank, and I could feel the warmth radiating from him, intoxicating and dangerous. My fingers brushed the edge of the table, desperate for some grounding, but it was useless. The pull toward him was undeniable. Zayne, He silenced me with a low hum, leaning so close I could feel his breath on my skin. Do you know how long I have restrained myself? He whispered. How many nights I have watched you, fought myself, kept my hands to myself. Every word unspoken, every glance withheld, it has been torture. I shivered involuntarily, heat pooling between my legs. My fingers trembled as they brushed the front of his jacket, almost daring him. I've waited too, I confessed, voice barely above a whisper. Waited for you two to want me. For a long moment, he simply looked at me, the calm mask of the Duke faltering in a way that sent a shiver through me. And then he moved. His hand found the small of my back, pulling me closer, not pressing, but enough to let me feel the hard strength beneath the fabric of his uniform. My breath caught, and a soft moan escaped me as our bodies aligned, warmth and desire coiling between us like a live thing. You are mine, Katherine, he murmured against my temple, his lips grazing my skin lightly, teasing, igniting every nerve ending. And I will wait, but I will not deny you what you deserve. I pressed closer, unable to stop myself, curling my fingers into his jacket, feeling the solid heat of him. I want you, I whispered, voice trembling. I have wanted you for so long. He tilted his head, letting our lips meet briefly, a brush of warmth that made my knees weaken. My heart raced, my pulse thundering. He kissed me again, this time deeper, more demanding, yet still restrained, teasing. Each press of his lips, each subtle touch sent a jolt through my body. His hands slid up my arms, down my sides, gentle but intentional, mapping every curve. I gasped softly, pressing closer, wanting, needing, desperate for him. And yet he pulled back just slightly, letting the fire smolder, not fully consumed. "I want you, Katherine. I want you so badly," he murmured against my lips, voice rough, husky, almost dangerous. "But I want us to be perfect. I want you to know everything before I take more." I trembled, heat rolling through me, desire and frustration entwined. "I know," I whispered. I trust you." His gaze softened, and with a slow, deliberate movement, he cupped my face, brushing a thumb along my cheek. "Then let me show you slowly. Let me prove how much you mean to me." And with that, he drew me into the warmth of his body, lips tracing mine in lingering, teasing kisses, hands exploring and igniting, each touch delicate yet insistent. I clung to him, breathless, the months of frustration and longing spilling over in soft moans, trembling hands, and whispered pleas. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, and we finally broke apart, panting, flushed, hearts pounding. He pressed his forehead against mine, voice low and tender. "You are mine," he said again, more softly this time. "All of you, and I will never let you doubt it again." I shivered, a smile tugging at my lips despite the heat and desire still burning in me. "All of you," I echoed, voice trembling. "Always." Why, the following spring, the estate was calm, the scandal resolved, and society had finally accepted the strength of our bond. Katherine Blackwood, the Duchess, artist, and independent woman, stood beside Zayne Blackwood, Duke of Blackwood, at a grand ball. Our hands brushed often, secret smiles passing between us, knowing glances that said more than words ever could. "Do you ever doubt me?" I asked softly, leaning into him as we watched the guests dance. "Never," he murmured, tilting my chin up to meet his gaze. "You are mine, and I am yours completely." I smiled, heart full, desire and love mingling into something breathtaking. "Then, let's never doubt again." He drew me close, hands resting possessively at my waist, lips brushing mine in a kiss both tender and fierce. "Never," he whispered. "Not now, not ever." For the first time since our marriage, I felt wholly, completely safe and loved. The months of longing, frustration, and slow-burning desire had culminated in a love that was fierce, undeniable, and entirely ours. And as we stood together, amidst the soft glow of the candlelight and the gentle music of the ball, I knew one truth above all. I had finally found my place. By his side,